All right. All right, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our financial aid information webinar. My name is Tamer Memkij, and I'm the network administrator for the Hawthorne Public Schools, and I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. Before we get started with this evening's event, I just want to go over some of the features of Zoom webinars that are available to everyone in attendance. Ms. Weggert will start off the webinar, and our hope that information that we are going to go over will answer many of the questions you may have. However, if you have any questions, you can use the question and answer button located on the bottom of the screen to submit your question to us, and we'll go through some of those questions during the question and answer session at the end of the webinar. I want to thank everyone for joining us, and without further ado, I would like to introduce our Director of Guidance, Ms. Christine Weggert.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I am Christine Weggert. I'm the Director of Guidance here at Hawthorne High School. I also would like to thank you all for joining us tonight for our financial aid presentation. This is a really important program, especially for our seniors who are preparing to begin and complete the FAFSA application as they are working on their college applications. Those of you who are joining us that may be parents of underclassmen, this is also a wonderful opportunity for you to get a head start and start to gain some knowledge regarding the financial aid process. So we welcome you all. I'd also like to take this time too, just to thank Tamer Memkij for putting this program together. With us tonight, we have Mr. John Kodomo, one of our school counselors. He is our financial aid coordinator at the high school and works tirelessly every year to ensure that we can facilitate this program and bring a representative in from the New Jersey Higher Education Student Assistance Authority. So thank you, Mr. Kodomo, for that. And then we also have our presenter, Doug Wilson, who again is representing HESA. I am going to turn it over now to Mr. Kodomo, who's going to say a couple words, and then we will get started with our presenter. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our first virtual financial aid night. I hope it goes well. As Ms. Weggert said, we'd like to welcome everybody on behalf of the Hawthorne High School and the Board of Education to this virtual presentation. We have Doug Wilson, who's going to be presenting, and hopefully if you have any questions, save them for the end, or when Mr. Wilson says he's ready to take a few questions. So without further ado, we'd like to turn it over to Mr. Wilson.
Hey. Thank you, John. Thank you, Christine. Let me make sure that I'm not on mute because after 6 months, I can never get the hang of this. Good evening, wherever you are. We want to thank you, and I want to thank the team at Hawthorne High School for bringing me here, even though virtually. We want to spend the next hour or so discussing the financial aid process for when your child begins his or her college education, which is just around the corner. As John and Christine mentioned, I'm representing the New Jersey Higher Education Student Assistance Authority in this capacity. HESA, in turn, works in conjunction with colleges and university administrators who administer financial aid. In fact, my day job is financial aid administrator at Kane University in Union. If any of you are thinking of attending that campus, not going to talk about that. Again, this is about the general financial aid process. If you parents or you students have an opportunity to visit a campus, either physically or probably virtually for the time being, at most open house or orientation events, there's usually a financial aid panel or standalone presentation, which they'll speak specifically about the financial aid process at that particular institution. The information we're providing you tonight is general information about applying for financial aid at virtually any college or university in the United States or its territories. In addition to presenting financial aid administrators are available to you and your children during their senior year, just before they begin enrollment in college, while they're enrolled in college, and when they're about to graduate, and sometimes after they graduate, to assist them in financing their education for 1 year or for the next 3 or 4 years, whatever the case may be, and assist them with the FAFSA or provide financing options beyond the FAFSA. So what types of aid are available? Basically, financial aid can be broken down into 4 types. If you look on the right side, those 4 types are grants, which are money based on financial need, which is based on the information you'll provide on the FAFSA. There are also scholarships, which are also free money, but those are based more on merit, academic, athletic, or other considerations. That's free money. Now, in some cases, grants and scholarships or your family's own resources aren't enough to cover the direct or indirect educational expenses. So some families may need to consider borrowing money in order to pay for their education. So there are low interest loans available for the student to borrow, in some cases, the parents. Another type of financial aid many people don't think about would be employment opportunities. Part-time employment through the federal work-study program or institutional work-study program on campus or within the campus community. And there are other options available for employment or some sort of compensation to help pay for your child's education. And these sources can come from the federal government, if you look on your left, from the state of New Jersey, if your child's thinking of attending school within the state, the colleges and universities, they often have funding themselves, or if you look within your own community, if you're part of any civic organization or any church, a lot of times there are scholarship opportunities which can award anywhere from a couple hundred to a few thousand to full tuition and fees, depending upon the scholarship amounts. So you can look into that. Now, if you are researching colleges and universities, which seniors you should be doing at this point, and you want to get an idea of how much it'll cost to attend that particular institution, each college has on its financial aid site something called a net price calculator, which will give you the tuition fees and room and board if you plan to live on campus for a full-time student for 1 year or 1 semester. And if you happen to know what your grant or scholarship eligibility is, you can find out by definition what the net price will be and decide from there how you're going to finance whatever the balance might be. Hopefully it's nothing, but you never know. I first want to talk about some of the federal programs. Once you complete the FAFSA, these are based on financial need. In other words, the family's ability to pay for your education. Basically what the federal government and the state government do with different formulas is they assess your ability to pay for your child's education based on factors such as your income, assets, number of persons in the household, number of persons attending college for 1 year. And they supplement your resources with their available resources. That's basically how financial aid works. No matter what school you're attending, if you're eligible for a Pell Grant, that's available at just about every college or university, no matter where you plan to attend. Now the awards vary. The maximum award for this year is $6,345. For the upcoming year, 21-22, that is to be determined by Congress and signed into law by the president, if and when that time comes. Other federal grant programs available would be the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, or SEOG. The amounts vary, the maximum being $4,000 a year. If there are any aspiring teachers, if your student agrees to teach a particular discipline, high need fields such as math, science, or certain foreign languages, in certain communities, high need communities, he or she may be eligible for a teach grant of up to $4,000 at that particular institution if the school participates in the teach grant. So those are the federal grant programs. I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about state grant and scholarship programs. State being New Jersey. And to qualify for these grants over the next few slides, the student has to be New Jersey resident and attending an institution, a 4-year or 2-year institution within the Garden State. Now, there was a time, like before 1982, where students could transfer tag monies outside of New Jersey, but those days are long gone. And unfortunately, that ended before I entered college. So anyway, there are plenty of good schools within the state of New Jersey if you're thinking of attending. One need-based grant, the basic one would be the tuition aid grant, or TAG. To qualify at a 4-year degree granting institution, if you, the student, have financial need, again, you'd have to be a full-time student, which is 12 or more credits per semester, and there are certain citizenship requirements. I'm going to talk again at the federal level, but basically, you, the student, you'd have to be a New Jersey resident, again, a US citizen, eligible non-citizen, or what's called a New Jersey Dreamer, or in the DACA program. Now, if you're thinking of starting your college career at the county college level, this is Passaic County, right? So, so if you're going to Passaic County Community College, there's a tag program. You don't have to be full-time, but you have to be at least half-time to qualify for the part-time tag program, which is prorated based on the full-time program. Other programs available at the state level would be EOF, Educational Opportunity Fund, which is available to economical and educationally disadvantaged students. Usually when you apply for admission on the college's admission application, at some point you may be asked if you'd like to participate in the EOF program. You check yes, you may be asked to provide some additional documents to determine if you're eligible for EOF. And in addition to funding that you see on the screen, EOF program also offers academic assistance and tutoring and other programs once you arrive on campus. Another program that, other programs that are currently available, that became available within the last few years, would be the Governor's Urban Scholarship for students who rank within the top 5% of their graduating class and attain at least a 3.0 at the end of their junior year, may qualify for a $1,000 GUS. Now that's only for students who reside in one of 14 distressed communities within the state of New Jersey. And I do not think Hawthorne is one of them. So I'm not going to mention that. I already did. Now you don't have to worry about which community you live in to qualify for the New Jersey STARS program. If you, the student, are within the top 15% of your class, either at the end of your junior or senior year, and again, you're going to start your college career at Passaic County Community College, you may qualify for a scholarship which will pay full-time tuition for up to 5 semesters at that community college. You'd have to maintain at least a 3.0 grade point average after the first year. And then if you graduate with at least a 3.25 and you transfer to a private or public 4-year institution within New Jersey, you would qualify for a program called NJ STARS 2, which will pay up to $2,500 per year at that 4-year institution. For women and minority students who are attending vocational programs, there's a program that started a couple years ago called NJ Gives, which awards up to $2,000 for that particular program. It's available at vocational schools and also the various county colleges within the state. Another program that started recently is the Community College Opportunity Grants, CCOG. After you've been considered for Pell, TAG, EOF, NJ STARS or not, this grant offers full tuition and fees minus any Pell or TAG that you're already receiving. That's provided your family's adjusted gross income is no higher than $65,000. So if you qualify for that, then that would basically cover all of your tuition and fees while your child's attending a community college, if that's the case. So those are the federal and state programs. I'm going to stop for a minute because I want to take a breath and ask, are there any questions about the federal or state programs before I proceed? Nothing came up. All right. So as I mentioned before, the amount of grant or scholarship money varies depending upon your financial need or your ability to pay. Now, for some reason, those grants and scholarships are not enough to cover those direct costs. Before I speak about loans, first thing you need to do, families, is look at whatever that gap is from the net price calculator, as I mentioned earlier. And if that amount is manageable meaning if you can pay whatever the shortfall is during the semester or within 4 or 5 months, most colleges and universities have payment plan options where you can pay without interest, perhaps enroll with a nominal fee within 4 or 5 months, whatever the gap is in terms of tuition and fees. If you're able to do that, great. Now, if that's not possible, as I mentioned early on, there are low interest loans available to students and to parents. Now, parents, when you think of loans, you think of credit checks. Now, that might be the case with some of the loans I mentioned, but I just want to mention, by virtue of the student completing the FAFSA, the federal application, you, the student, would be offered what's called the Federal Direct Loan Program automatically without a credit check. And this loan pays up to $5,500 between subsidized and unsubsidized loan for the first year. And this last bullet displays the current interest rates for the direct loan program. Now, if you've done your research already and you've seen the price of tuition and fees, you know that $5,500 might not cut it at your particular college or university you're thinking of attending. So if you do need to take out an additional loan, most colleges participate in programs or supplemental loan programs, which will cover whatever the balance is. One of them comes from the state of New Jersey. It's called the NJ Class Program, where I don't want to say there's no limit, but students or parents can borrow up to the student's cost of education minus other resources that they're receiving. For example, if the school's budget or cost of attendance is $50,000 for 1 year, and you're receiving $20,000 of grants, scholarships, and direct loans, then conceivably you, the student, or you, the parent, could borrow up to the difference, $30,000, or whatever that difference is. That's one program. NJ Class loans are available at fixed and variable interest rates. Oops. I think I'm going a little too fast. In addition to NJ Class, as I mentioned before, there are other lenders that offer low interest loan programs. Now, these loans, I should mention, are based on credit worthiness. Now, some of those lenders include Sallie Mae, Discover, Wells Fargo, PNC. You may have heard that. Many colleges have a preferred lender list where you can investigate and decide on your own which one would be the best for you. I mentioned before, parents, you could take out a loan on your child's behalf. In addition to the private loans, there's one federal loan, which you might want to look into. That is the Federal Parent Loan for Undergraduate Students. The acronym is PLUS, where you, the parent, can borrow on behalf of your child to borrow whatever your child needs for the upcoming year. Now, I do want to mention, in the case of private loans or the PLUS loan, now with most federal aid, we're going to advise you to apply earlier rather than later. With private loans or PLUS, we're going to flip the script. You should apply for these later rather than earlier. In other words, look at whatever resources are available, grants, scholarships, and so forth. And then a few months before your child begins college and you realize you don't have enough resources on your own from grants and scholarships, then you should start looking into private loans or PLUS. Reason being, as I mentioned before, these are based on credit worthiness. And if you apply for a PLUS loan now, you may be credit approved, and that credit approval lasts for 6 months or 180 days. But in most cases, schools are not going to begin certifying these loans until probably May or June of 2021. And so if you've applied now, most likely that loan, that credit check will have expired. You have to go through the credit process again. So again, the optimal time will probably be May or June of your child's senior year if you need to apply for a private loan. I mentioned one of the financial aid opportunities would be scholarships. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, other than to mention that they're available from within your own community, or some cases the colleges or university. It could be awarded based on academic or athletic ability, SAT scores, ACT scores, or whatever the school looks upon favorably. They're looking for potential academically or in other areas. Probably your best resource, students, if any of you are here, your guidance office. So please, they're a wonderful resource as far as advising you what scholarship opportunities are available within your own community. And of course, they can also assist you with the FAFSA. So don't forget that. So before I speak about the application process, any questions about the program, any of the programs that I mentioned? Okay, probably you might be typing questions as we speak, which is fine. So we can wait till the end, that's fine. Now, as Christine mentioned, and John mentioned, there's the FAFSA, which basically all of you will be completing for any college or university you're thinking of attending. And there are a couple of other applications you need to consider, depending on where you plan to attend. Now, if you as a student are thinking of attending a college in New England, in addition to the FAFSA, you might be asked to complete what's called the CSS Profile. It's a separate application from the FAFSA for institutions which have large endowment amounts or institutional monies. They award need-based or merit-based aid on a different level than on the FAFSA. So they'll ask you a different set of questions than the FAFSA. For example, normally on the FAFSA, you wouldn't be asked to provide the net worth of your primary residence. On the CSS Profile, you would. So that's just one example. To find out whether or not you have to complete the CSS Profile, which is done online, check with your college's financial aid or admissions office, or check their website. And if you do have to complete the CSS Profile, on this screen would be the website, or if you need to speak to a representative, they have a chat line available. Now the FAFSA, free application for federal student aid. For the 2021-2022 school year, that application will be available, yes, a week from today. So it's not that you have to log in at 12:01 a.m. on October 1st. The application will be available starting next Thursday. I don't want to say you have plenty of time, but we advise you to complete this application as early as possible, because in some cases, schools award institutional monies on a first come, first served basis starting February or March. So you want to complete that application as early as possible. Another argument for completing the FAFSA earlier rather than later, in case you encounter any problems as you complete the application or you make an error, you have time to correct it. So again, the 21-22 application will be available starting next week. There's also a mobile app which you can download on your Android or your iPhone or your tablet. When you're completing the FAFSA, you'll be reporting income from the tax year of 2019. Keep that in mind. Now, some of you are thinking, wait, why am I reporting information from 2019? Because for the past few years, FAFSA information has been gathered based on prior year information. And some of you are still wondering, but wait, my income in 2019 does not mirror anything near what I'm earning or not earning in 2020. Now that's especially true this year because I don't have to talk about the environment we're in. So what do you do in those cases? Well, complete the FAFSA as we're recommending tonight. In other words, report the 2019 income information. When your students' FAFSA is processed and your colleges start receiving the information, if there has been a change in circumstance, changes include but not limited to loss of employment, loss of untaxed income or taxable income, divorce, separation, or death of a parent, unusual or medical or dental expenses, something that was not anticipated, whatever the case may be, complete the FAFSA, and then contact the financial aid office at the college or university you're thinking of attending to explain those circumstances, and your school will give you instructions on how to address that change in circumstances. In many cases, depending on the circumstance, the school can reassess your student's eligibility for federal and state assistance. So again, contact the college or university after you complete the FAFSA. So again, report the 2019 information. Now, if there are any students on the line or even parents, there's an important concept we want you to be aware of, not just with financial aid, but with the college admission process. From this point forward, this application is yours, you being the student. So gone are the days of sending information to the parents of. So students, make sure you need to take ownership of this application, FAFSA, college admission, and so forth. So much so that when you're completing the FAFSA, you'll be completing certain sections, and they'll be asking if you or yours, meaning the student, make sure you provide your information, not your parents, because more times than we care to count, we've had instances where the student is completing the application and they're being asked, what was your adjusted gross income for 2019? They have a copy of their parents' tax return, and the parents will say they earned a modest $50,000, and the student reports it in their section. And when the FAFSA is processed, the school and the state receive the information, and they'll say, oh, wait, the student has the potential to earn $50,000 a year. They don't need federal or state monies. So again, make sure whichever section you're in, you're reporting the correct information. This is a screenshot of the FAFSA. For example, this is specifically the parent section. So make sure you're reporting the correct information in the correct section. I mentioned before, applying earlier rather than later. Each school has a specific priority filing deadline, a recommended filing date deadline. So you want to apply based on the earliest deadline. So for example, school A has a FAFSA deadline of February 1st, school B has a date of April 1st, school C has a date of March 1st, then you're going to want to shoot for the earliest date, February 1st in this scenario, to be considered for maximum federal, state, and institutional assistance. The FAFSA is available electronically at studentaid.gov. It used to be FAFSA.gov. Actually, I think if you still go to FAFSA.gov, you'll be rerouted to studentaid.gov, which covers just about everything from FAFSA filing to signing master promissory notes. Yes, there is a paper version, which you can download as a PDF, complete, mail to the federal processor, but that takes so long, and that is so 1980s, as opposed to completing the application online, which could be done within a matter of days.
Doug, if you don't mind, I'm going to step in real quick. I do have a question that came in a few minutes ago, and I think we should probably answer it now before we get too far ahead of ourselves. I have a parent who asked, what was the name of the federal loan that you had mentioned?
The Federal Direct Loan Program or the PLUS? Let's go. Well, I'll talk about both. The loan for the students would be the Direct Loan Program. It might also be referred to as the Direct Stafford Loan Program. Again, that's for the students, which offers up to $5,500 for freshmen. The other loan that the parents can take out on the student's behalf, you can't forget this, it's called PLUS, Parent Loan for Undergraduate Students. Does that answer the question, or does that address the question? I hope.
I think that's good for now. I'll also type that into the chat box here for that parent, and if she has any further questions, I'll let her clarify. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Where are we? Now you saw on a couple of screens earlier, there were bullets called IRS Data Retrieval Tool, and you're wondering, what is that? I mentioned earlier, when you're completing the FAFSA, you, the parent, and you, the student, will be asked separately to provide income information, again, from tax year 2019. You can enter that information manually, or you can transfer that information directly from the IRS database if you filed your 2019 tax return, which hopefully you've done already. So at the point where you indicate you filed a 2019 tax return, the next question you, the parent, or you, the student, will be asked is, would you like to transfer that information? We hope you do. And if you do, after you've identified yourself or confirmed your identity, excuse me, you'll be directed to the IRS database. And once you confirm that, yes, this is me, certain information such as your adjusted gross income, tax paid, untaxed pension and annuities, and other items from your tax return will be transferred directly onto your student's FAFSA. And a little later on, I'll give an argument why you would do that as opposed to doing it manually. Now, we encourage you to use the IRS data retrieval because it reduces errors, among other things. Now, not everybody's going to be eligible to use it. For example, if you are married, but you and your spouse filed separate returns in 2019, you'll have to combine your information and enter enter AGI and tax paid manually directly onto the FAFSA. But if you're able to use the IRS data retrieval, we encourage you to do that. Another bullet you might have seen earlier is something called the FSA ID. A few years ago, it was called a PIN. What is the FSA ID? Well, basically, that is your electronic signature. The student would have to have an FSA ID because they're signing and certifying their information is correct. And the parent would have to have a separate FSA ID to verify that their information is correct. Now, the FSA ID has other uses. In addition to completing the FAFSA, if you, the parent, decide to apply for a PLUS loan, or if you, the student, decide to accept a federal direct Stafford loan, you're going to have to sign something called a promissory note. Students, you might not know what a promissory note is. Parents certainly do. You certainly do. That's a promise to repay the loan according to the terms and conditions outlined on the promissory note. So that can be done electronically with your FSA ID. Now, if there are any parents who have an FSA ID already because you completed a FAFSA for an older child or for yourself, if you were in college recently, you can use that same FSA ID to electronically sign this next child's application. And even if you're not ready to complete the FAFSA tonight, there's something that you, this parent, and you, the student, can do tonight. That is, apply for an FSA ID at fsaid.ed.gov. Caution, well, not caution, just a word of advice. When you do apply for an FSA ID, you have to provide your identifying information, name, social security number, date of birth, and you'll also be sent a security code to either your mobile device or to your email. So make sure you have your phone or email ready to retrieve that information, to authenticate your information. Now, at this point, I want to talk about the eligibility requirements for student aid. Now, if you look at some of the bullets, some of you are wondering, wait, there's something missing. The question about how much money you have to make. Get that out of your mind. How much money you make would not disqualify you from receiving federal or state assistance. Now, it might, for certain types of assistance, it might make a difference on the type of assistance or the amount of assistance that you receive. But basically, to apply for any sort of federal student aid, even direct loans, what you see on the screen are the basic requirements. First and foremost, the student would have to have a valid social security number. Student has to have a social security number. I'll repeat that because if the parents do not have an SSN, they're undocumented or otherwise do not have a social security number, but the student does, doesn't matter. The student can complete the application. That's what's important. Also, the student has to be enrolled or accepted for enrollment at an eligible program of study, meaning offering a degree or certificate program, and that participate in the federal student aid programs. Also, the student has to be a US citizen or an eligible non-citizen. Eligible non-citizen usually includes permanent residents, refugees, or parolees. If there are any male applicants, you ever heard of selective service? Your father probably has, or your grandfather has. That's a requirement for men across the country. You have to register with the selective service system when you turn 18. Now, as you're completing the FAFSA now, if you're only 17 or 16, of course, you don't have to register with selective service, but for the year that you turn 18, for example, your sophomore year, when you're ready to complete that year's FAFSA, you'd have to register. You'd either have to go to the selective service website, sss.gov, or you can apply directly on the FAFSA if you're already 18. Again, this is for male students to receive any federal benefits, such as federal employment or federal financial aid assistance. On this screen and the next screen are a summary of what you can expect to complete on the FAFSA. Now, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, this is the student's application. So by no coincidence, the first section has to do with the student. Student provides his name, his social security number, date of birth. Hopefully, students, you've committed your social security number to memory and not saved it on your phone. That's a no-no. As far as your name, this should be very basic. As a rule of thumb, report your name as it appears on your social security card, because this information is going to be matched against certain federal databases, including Social Security Administration. So if your name is Anthony, people call you Tony or Tone or whatever, you put Tone on your FAFSA, that could cause an error when it's processed because it doesn't match what's on the Social Security Administration's records. So make sure you get that right the first time. Students, if you had any income or if you have any assets, you'll be asked to provide that information, again, from tax year 2019. And if I didn't mention this already, you'll be completing the FAFSA every year that you're attending college or you want to receive financial assistance. So the 21-22 application, as I said, that'll be available next week for your freshman year. So for your sophomore year, the 22-23 application, that'll be available starting October 1st, 2021. So if you want to mark your calendars every October 1st, that's when your FAFSA for the next year will be available. Keep that in mind because 8 is not automatically renewable. You have to complete the application every year, in case I forgot to mention that. And there's also a section where the student or the parent would provide their information. I mentioned before, eligibility for aid is based on factors such as number of persons in the household or also the number of persons attending college within the household, except for the parents. Parents, you'll be asked to provide your income information, again, initially from tax year 2019. If there's been a change in 2020 or if you're filling this out in 2021, if a change occurs, contact your school's financial aid office for further instructions. What you see here is a screenshot of what you can expect, and this is what you aspire to when you complete the FAFSA, the confirmation page. Congratulations, you completed the application. Now, you're not necessarily finished because New Jersey residents, you're going to be directed to the state's website to create a state ID because you'll be asked to log on to HESA's website from time to time to view your eligibility for TAG or other state assistance. Something else you'll see on the confirmation page, parents, if any of you are blessed to have 2 or more children attending college in 1 year, if one child completes the FAFSA successfully, and your second child's ready to complete his or her FAFSA, you can let Peter know, hey, wake up. It's time for you to complete your FAFSA, and you can transfer your information, parents, onto your next child's FAFSA. So that'll save you a few steps, and then your second child just completes his or her information at that point. And again, as far as e-signing the FAFSAs, you can use the very same FSA ID parent to sign both children's applications. Now, if you complete the application and you make mistakes can be made and mistakes can be corrected. But again, if you do make a mistake, we encourage you to apply the FAFSA earlier rather than later so that you or the school can find those mistakes and resolve whatever the issue is. Now, what we have on this screen are some of the most common mistakes. I addressed the need to report the information or your name as it appears on your Social Security card, likewise for the parents. And again, make sure that whichever section you're in, you're reporting the right person's information, not the parent's information, the students or vice versa. Now, regarding parents' marital status, one of the first questions you'll be asked parents is, what is your marital status? There'll be about 5 choices, married and living together, unmarried and living together, separated, divorced, widowed, whatever the case may be. Now, if your parents are divorced, but the parent you're living with has remarried, be careful. You want to report married/remarried, not separated or divorced. In other words, you're going to have to report the step-parents information, so you make sure you get that right the first time. Another common mistake would be reporting the tax withheld. In other words, the amount reported on your W-2 as opposed to your actual tax liability. That's not because that's what they're asking for on the FAFSA. So all the more reason for you to use the IRS data retrieval, parents and students, if you file the tax return. If any of you are receiving Social Security benefits, since 2010, you no longer have to report untaxed portions of Social Security benefits on the FAFSA. So make sure you're not reporting untaxed Social Security benefits. Likewise, for any students who are receiving untaxed Social Security benefits, you're not going to report that on the FAFSA. So those are the most common mistakes and you want to make sure you get it right.
Doug, I have another question that came in.
Yes.
I have somebody that asked if both parents need to have an FSA ID. And I know the answer to that is no, but I'm going to follow that question up with one of my own. If there are more than one student in the household attending college or over the years attending college, does the same parent have to be the one to sign the FAFSA with the FSA ID, or can that alternate depending upon, who wants to take a turn at that time?
Okay, so you are correct as far as the first part of your question. If the student is living with both parents, only one parent is required to e-sign the FAFSA. As far as who signs it or e-signs it, it doesn't matter. One parent can sign it the first year, the next parent can sign it the next year, but each parent would have to have separate FSA IDs in order to do that. So it doesn't matter. As long as the parent who's e-signed it reported his or her identifiers, in other words, social security number, in the parent section of the FAFSA, that person can e-sign the application. So if mom signs it the first year, mom doesn't have to sign it each and every year. Dad could sign it the next year if some reason mom is not available the second year. That's a good question. Now, coming back to verification. Earlier, I was talking about the IRS data retrieval and the need to use that as opposed to reporting information manually. Some of you might be wondering, well, why bother going to the IRS website if I can just key in the information? This is why. When the FAFSA is processed, some students are selected for a process called verification. Now, if you're selected at the federal level, about 1 in 3 of you will be at the federal level. Your college will ask you for specific information to verify that the information you report on the FAFSA is correct. One of those items would include a form for you to list the number of family members in your household and the number of persons attending college. Another document you might be asked to provide would be a tax document, such as a signed copy of your tax return, 2019 tax return, or your tax return transcript from the IRS. If, however, you, the parent, or you, the student, use the IRS data retrieval tool, then there's no need for the school to ask for that tax information because that information, AGI and tax paid, has already been verified by the IRS. So by using the IRS data retrieval, if your child's selected for verification, that's 1 or 2 documents less that you have to submit to the school or to the state of New Jersey if you're selected for state verification. So, and another thing, as I mentioned before, this information is going directly to the student, not to the parents. So students, make sure that you check your email regularly for any communication from the U.S. Department of Education, from the state of New Jersey, HESA, HESAA, or from your college's financial aid office, where they may be asking you for additional information. Because if you don't reply within a timely manner, you could risk lose eligibility for federal or state funds unnecessarily. And that could be potentially thousands of dollars that you lose because you didn't respond. Now, you remember a few screens earlier, I was talking about eligibility requirements for federal student aid, one of them being citizenship, where I said you have to be a US citizen or eligible non-citizen. Now, what if you're an undocumented student or what's called a dreamer? Now, unfortunately, under current law, you're still not eligible for federal programs such as Pell Grant or direct loans. Depending upon the state you're in, many states do offer assistance to undocumented students, even though they don't qualify for federal aid. And one of them is the state of New Jersey. New Jersey has something called the Alternative Financial Aid Application. The questions are similar to the FAFSA. You would go onto HESA's website, njfams.hesa.org, to complete the Alternative Financial Aid Application. And you'll be considered, you, the student, will be considered for state funds such as TAG and EOF and all these other state programs that I mentioned earlier. In addition to completing the alternative financial aid application, when you're applying for admission, at some point, either with admissions or financial aid, you'll be asked to sign an affidavit indicating that you are applying for citizenship or you're working on the process to legalize your immigration status. Basically, to qualify for the TAG or any programs, even if you don't qualify for federal aid, you have to have attended New Jersey high school for at least 3 years and graduated from that high school or received an equivalency diploma. And again, for male applicants, you still have to register with the Selective Service System. This is a screenshot of what you can expect to see on NJ-FAMS when you get to that point. There'll also be a to-do list to guide you as far as what documents you may need to provide or where to view your award if you qualify for TAG or other programs.
Doug, if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in. We have 2 additional questions that I think are specific to the FAFSA application and some things we have spoken about already. So if you don't mind, I'm going to read those off.
Go for it.
First question, in regards to the taxes paid versus taxes withheld, if the parent owes taxes for 2019, does he include this in his estimate or just use the taxes withheld until the taxes are paid? And I can read that again if you'd like me to.
Let me try to answer the question. You would want to report your tax, if I'm phrasing this correctly, your tax paid or your tax liability as it's reported on your tax return. On the FAFSA, it'll tell you which line on the 1040 to report it. So if you owe taxes as opposed to getting a refund, that you would not report that at all. You would only report your tax liability. In other words, in most cases, it would be the amount that you look up on your tax table. For those of you who complete your own tax returns are familiar with that process, that's what you would be reporting. So regardless of whether you owe taxes in the end, whatever your tax liability is at based on the tax table, that's the amount that you would be reporting on the FAFSA.
Okay, our next question. You mentioned enrollment as a requirement for completing the FAFSA. Do you have to be accepted and choose a school before completing? And I can answer that. So as of right now, our seniors, you are still in the application process. You're going to be listing the schools that you are completing applications for, and you would like your financial information to be sent to. So in order to complete the financial aid application at this time, you do not have acceptances yet. You want to go ahead, you want to complete the application, you're going to list the schools that you are planning on applying to and the schools that you would like your information to be sent to. So if you are accepted, they can go ahead and generate a financial aid package for you. That list as well too may change over the next couple of months. So you have the ability and the flexibility to log back in as well too to your financial aid application and modify that list accordingly as well too. And if there's anything, Doug, you would like to add or edit to my comment.
No, couldn't said it any better. Yeah, just to reassure families, even if your child hasn't applied for admission to a particular college that you list on the FAFSA, what will happen is the college will maintain that FAFSA information. It'll be in limbo until, boom, you've been offered admission to the college. So at that point, if they have already got the FAFSA data, then it'll be that much quicker as far as getting an admissions offer and then a financial aid package or request for additional information, whatever the case may be. So yes, so long story short, you don't have to be offered admission or even have applied for admission to a particular college in order to list it on the FAFSA. It's a good question. So going forward, as you're looking at each college and university, I mentioned the net price calculator, which will list your direct costs, meaning for your tuition and fees or room and board, which would be the first 2 bullets. You need to consider other expenses, which you won't be billed for directly, but at some point you'll be paying for example, books, supplies, and equipment for your particular education. They've increased exponentially since I was in college, but yes, you need to factor that in when you're looking into college costs or how much it'll cost to pay for their education. Also, you need to look into transportation expenses. If you're commuting from home or from an off-campus apartment, you need to take that into consideration or create your own budget. Colleges create what's called a standard cost of attendance because they take that into consideration, not just tuition, room, and board, but the cost for transportation, books and supplies, and miscellaneous expenses. And if any of you are lucky enough to participate in a study abroad program, nobody's going abroad anytime soon, but if the world does open up at some point and you do study outside the country, outside the continent, your cost of attendance, your budget can be increased to factor in those additional transportation or air costs, airfares, in order to attend college in Europe, Asia, or wherever you plan to attend college. So make sure you take those expenses into consideration. A few other things to take into consideration. If you're thinking of attending a 2-year or 4-year college, in some cases, you might not necessarily graduate within 2 years or 4 years, whatever the case may be. For example, if you're the student are taking remedial or English as a second language courses, that may eat up an additional semester or year. So you may actually spend 4, 5, or 6 years in order to complete a 4-year education. Also, if at any point you change your major, it may take you a little longer because some of the credits that you earn in one major may not be transferable to the next major. And speaking of transfer, if you transfer from multiple colleges or even from one college to another, some of the college credits that you earn in one college may not be transferred to the other college. Now, at a community colleges in New Jersey, there are agreements with other 4-year colleges within New Jersey. Basically, whatever you earn at that community college, in your case, Passaic, that can be transferred to your 4-year degree program if you transfer within New Jersey. So that's about the only exception. Other things you might want to take into consideration if you participated in the co-op or internship opportunity, maybe not during your first year, but in your junior or senior year, that might be an extra semester where you'll need additional costs, or you need to spend an additional semester in order to build your portfolio. So take that into consideration. I spoke about study abroad, and also if there are any moving expenses, you need to take that into consideration as well. I want to talk a little bit about the expected family contribution. I mentioned earlier, your ability to pay is based upon the information you provide on the FAFSA. What the federal government does is calculate something called the EFC. It's not what you owe, it's an estimate of how much the family should be able to contribute towards your child's education. The EFC is used by schools to determine your eligibility for need-based assistance, such as CCOG, I mentioned work study, and the subsidized direct loan program, or certain need-based program offered by the colleges or universities. And the EFC can mean different things at different institutions. For example, let's talk about the Smiths family. Family lives in New Jersey, which has married parents, both age 52. There are 4 persons in the household and one child going to college. Their adjusted gross income, parents' adjusted gross income for 2019 was $120,000, and they have about 20 grand in assets. Student didn't have any income or assets, but when all was said and done, the EFC, or expected family contribution, turned out to be $20,830 in this case. So what does that mean? It depends on which institution the child attends. Now, if you're looking at the second column, community college, where the costs are considerably lower than at a 4-year college, you notice that the EFC, 20,000, is greater than the cost of attendance and that financial need. It's actually negative, but on here it's 0. That means that the student wouldn't qualify for any need-based assistance, such as subsidized Stafford loan or work study, but that doesn't mean they don't qualify for any assistance. At the very least, they qualify for an unsubsidized direct loan. Or there might be some institutional funding where the student might qualify. Now, if you move over to the right, to a public 4-year institution, you notice that the costs are a tad higher than a community college, in this case, $25,000. You notice the EFC, that hasn't changed. So if you do the math, the difference would be $4,731 in this scenario, which means the college would award up to this amount in need-based assistance, such as the subsidized direct loan program and/or work study. If you move a little further to the right at independent institutions where the price tag is even higher than at a public institution, and you notice that the EFC is the same, when you do the math or the subtraction, you have more wiggle room or financial need where the school can award institutional or need-based assistance from the federal government or from the institution. And something to consider when you're looking at colleges and universities, don't be discouraged by the price tag or the initial costs, because depending upon your financial need or what the cost is, many higher priced colleges and universities, they have institutional assistance, which might not be available at the state college level or the community college level, which could actually offset some of the costs which you'd normally see at a regular college or university. In fact, at one point, if not now, I believe Seton Hall actually had a program which would pay the institutional costs to the point where the student would be paying tuition comparable to tuition and fees at Rutgers, let's say. So again, don't worry so much about the initial price tag. Look at what's available as far as institutional funding as well as federal and state assistance. Now, as I mentioned before, we want you to apply earlier rather than later. In terms of the FAFSA, at least, as I mentioned before, your application will be available starting next week. Timetable, we gave you a range of March. A school might ask you to complete the application in February. If that's the case, complete the FAFSA in February. Now, in terms of award letters, we gave you a range of February to May. Some schools, they're becoming a little more competitive, so you might actually receive an award offer even in January or even December if you've completed your FAFSA early enough. And then in June or July, parents get ready for this. That's when the term bills come out for the upcoming fall semester. That's where you write the check or you pay electronically on the school's website, whatever the case may be. So be aware of that. And also something else to be aware, parents, you might be actually footing the bill or paying that bill, but the bill will be directed to the student, because in reality, the only relationship that a college or university has with a family is with the student, not the parent. So students, again, take ownership of your college process, your application process going forward. Now your guidance team can speak to this more than I can, but where you go from here, hopefully you've been looking at colleges and universities or visiting campus when you had the chance. Perhaps you will sometime in the future. If not, look at them virtually or look at their website to see what programs are available or what they have as far as safety measures, which you're probably doing even at the high school level. Those safety measures are available at the college level as well. And again, complete your FAFSA as early as possible. Now, as far as the deadline at the state level, I'm not sure if I mentioned this. In reality, for freshmen, you have until September of next year to complete the FAFSA to be considered for tag. But you don't want to do that because your bill is going to be due like 1 or 2 months prior to that. And then for your second year, your deadline moves up a few months to April of 2021. So again, mark your calendars every year. As far as other resources, again, check with your guidance office to see what resources are available within your school or within your own community or within the college or university themselves. I mentioned earlier employment opportunities, the work-study program. Something else that would be available for you students living on campus. There are persons called resident advisors or resident assistants or RAs that assist students with the college experience when they're living on campus. And as compensation, RAs, they would receive full or partial room and board waiver as opposed to a stipend as opposed to an actual paycheck in order to pay for some of your educational expenses. So those are some opportunities that are available. As far as private scholarship searches, there's the World Wide Web. Just word of caution, parents and students. If any entity asks you for any sort of payment, they ask for your bank number or credit card number, be very wary. Most legitimate scholarship searches are not going to charge you a fee. The exception would be the CSS Profile, where there is a small fee to complete the application. Other than that, if anybody's asking for anything, because unfortunately there are entities who want to take advantage of families as they're looking at college opportunities. So be very careful when you're going forward. Another thing we do want to mention, parents, you probably opened up a college savings plan when your child was born or when they were very young. Why do I mention this now? You might have a younger child, or you might know somebody who has a young child or is about to become a parent. You might want to encourage them to open up a college savings plan, because those of you who've done it, you know how when you invest over a certain amount of time, that money grows exponentially in order to pay for your child's education. In the state of New Jersey, the plan NJ Best, in addition to the college savings that accumulate over the years through the investments, they actually offer a scholarship which will pay up to $1,500 a year for that first year. And something else to consider, college savings plans do not have to be opened by the parent. I mention this because parents, in about 10 to 20 years, what's going to happen? You're going to be grandparents. And guess what? You can open up a savings plan for your grandchild. So it's something to think about. I mentioned some of the websites earlier. Here they are again from the state of New Jersey. When in doubt, if you forget anything, just remember HESA.org. That'll take you to just about everything that you see here. And that concludes the slideshow. So I'll open the floor, as it were, for any questions. I don't know if anything else came up during the presentation.
Yes. So Doug, thank you again. I do have a couple questions that have come in, and we'll give it a few more minutes to see if any more come in. I did want to touch upon a few things, and actually one question that did come in was something I was going to mention before we concluded here today. First and foremost, this presentation will be posted to the Hawthorne Guidance website. So this will be accessible to all of you. It'll be posted tomorrow. You can also re-watch this as well too on our Hawthorne Public Schools YouTube page. So if you feel as though you missed something, wanted to go back, take some notes, we will have this accessible to you as well too. One question that did come up that I wanted to touch upon was our local scholarship program. So every year, seniors are eligible to apply for local scholarships. Mrs. Zach, who is one of our school counselors, she is in charge of our scholarship program. Sometime between the months of December and January, we will be meeting with our seniors to notify them about the local scholarship program, the application process, and get them that application that they can begin filling out. We have a wonderful, lovely scholarship awards program in May, and it's a great opportunity for students to apply for local scholarships to earn some additional scholarship money. And we generally award close to $100,000 annually to our own seniors. So great opportunity. And we always tell students, apply, apply, apply. It puts you, in that running for some really great money to help you with the process. Also, national scholarships, we do post those on Naviance, and many of the resources that you provided here tonight, Doug, a lot of the different websites that you provided, they can all be found on our website as well too, if you look under financial aid. So I do have one very specific question here, again, for you. I have a family that is considering selling their home and renting for a year before buying another home. Would having the profits from the sale listed as an asset negatively impact financial aid as opposed to holding on to the house as an asset?
Yeah, actually, I was reading that question as you were speaking, trying to figure out how to address that. I'm not sure if this is an answer. Let me just address it in terms of completing the information on the FAFSA. I mentioned before Parents and also students would report their income and assets. Assets would include investments. Investments do not include, as I mentioned before, your primary residence, unless you live in a multifamily home and you rent out a portion of it. What you would do in that case is report the fraction of the home that is rented out, or the net value of that home. So if you live in a 3-family dwelling and your family occupies one dwelling and you rent out the other 2, you would report the net worth of 2/3 of the net worth of your of that dwelling. And now, as far as it negatively impacting financial aid, I don't want to call it negatively. Well, yeah, it could result in a higher amount. Parents, there's one thing to keep in mind, and there is an asset protection allowance on the FAFSA. I'm not sure what it is currently. For many years that that allowance was about $50,000. So if your total assets were below that threshold, they would be excluded from the EFC calculation. So in those cases, it would not negatively impact you. Now, as a follow-up to that, I mentioned a couple of minutes ago the 529. If any of you do have a college savings plan, you might be wondering, is that included as an asset or as an investment? I believe it is. If you look at the instructions on the FAFSA, it'll guide you as far as whether or not to report the present value of that 529. Again, depending upon the amount and the whatever the parent asset protection allowance is, it wouldn't necessarily negatively impact you. I mean, just reported the information as honestly as you can based on the information you have at hand. So I'm not going to say, oh, it's going to disqualify you, but again, report it, but it might not impact you or impact your child as badly as you thought it might be. But the important thing is complete the application. There's no fee. Worst that can happen is you don't qualify for Pell Grant. That doesn't mean you don't qualify for anything. Another reason for completing the FAFSA, I'm going off on a tangent, but do want to mention scholarships. They're generally based on merit as opposed to financial need, but some scholarship programs are very competitive. So in some cases, if there are 2 students of equal merit, a scholarship committee might look at financial need as a tiebreaker. So it'd be good to have the FAFSA on file just in case.
All right, so we've got another question pertaining to merit aid. How is merit-based aid going to be determined in most colleges when many students do not have standardized test scores? And I think, Doug, maybe you can touch upon this specifically with Kean University. I think it is going to differ from institution to institution. We did have an admission panel last week where this was of conversation. Many schools are absolutely taking this into consideration because seniors just, for lack of better words, have not been able to take SAT, ACT tests, which normally have been a key element for consideration into merit scholarship aid. So many schools and institutions are pulling back on having the standardized test scores be part of that consideration. That is not all. Some schools still may be looking or will be viewing them with more flexibility. But overall, the consensus really seems to be that schools are taking into consideration with flexibility and understanding that students just have not had the ability to take these tests and don't want to negatively have an impact on them and their merit aid due to that. But I will hand it over to you from, if you could maybe add from your perspective.
No, you said it well. In fact, Kean has recently started those discussions at the institutional level. Nothing is etched in stone yet, but that is a consideration. Not Kean, some institutions, they might look at other measures of potential, including grade point average at your institution. That might be consideration in lieu of standardized test scores. So it's, yeah, it is going to be a challenge at institutional levels. I mean, speak to your admissions team if that's necessary to find out what their plan is. Some schools might not have a plan at this point. But yeah, that is a consideration.
Okay, that is the last question I have. So we'll, we'll give it another few minutes, see if any other questions come in.
Doug, are we remiss by stating that some of these questions are a little advanced as far as they should be handled by a tax professional to get the exact information that the parents need? Would you agree to that or no?
I can render an opinion. It's not really necessary. I mean, just as families might pay somebody to prepare their tax return, as opposed to doing it by themselves, that's their choice because these are professionals. In terms of paying somebody to complete a financial aid application, I mean, there are persons who have that expertise and make a living doing that. But the overwhelming majority of college applicants or financial aid applicants actually complete the application on their own because FAFSA is not that hard to complete. Yeah, I say that because that's what I do for a living, but it's really not. I mentioned before the IRS data retrieval, so it's easier to transfer information directly onto the FAFSA. And even if you do stumble at some point, if that's the case, you've got plenty of resources, Guidance Office, Federal Student Aid Information Center, HESA, certainly, and of course the colleges and universities at the financial aid offices will be glad to answer your questions free of charge. There was a company, some of you, if any of you are old enough to remember, FAFSA.com, which charged, I think, $80 to complete an application, where the FAFSA in reality is free. In fact, there are still some services which actually charge hundreds of dollars to complete a FAFSA to promise you hundreds of thousands of dollars of unclaimed resources. I don't know what connections they have, but in order to complete a FAFSA, it's really not that difficult. Again, there are plenty of free resources to assist you if you have any questions completing the application. I mean, it's not rocket science. I mean, it is your child's education, your child's future. But again, most of the questions are pretty straightforward, and you've got plenty of support in completing the application, free support.
I'd just like to add too, and this is, it relates to everything that we spoke about here tonight, but also to just pertaining to, the overall circumstance that all of us are in this year, and so much that's still just up in the air and unknown. And, unfortunately, our seniors in particular have, had, missed some opportunities in regards to the standardized testing. There might have been some changes within, the family, whether it was loss of job or changes within medical bills. In all of the conversations that I and my counselors have had with admission representatives, talking to you tonight, Doug, my biggest recommendation would be, when in doubt, ask questions, reach out to the particular schools that your child is interested in attending, talk to those admissions officers. If you have questions pertaining to financial aid, reach out to their individual financial aid offices. They have the experts that can really help answer questions for you. Please reach out to the guidance office as well too. We want to help you throughout this process during this uncertain time, and just make sure that we have a successful plan for each and every one of your students and help you along the way. All right, I have no more questions coming in. So I think At this point, we will conclude our program. If anybody has individual questions, Doug, if it would be appropriate, we could ask them. They could reach out to us in the guidance office, and if appropriate, we could maybe put them in contact with you individually. And we're all here to help you and work together as a team in this endeavor as we not only complete the financial aid process, but the college application process as a whole.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right, wonderful. Well, I hope everybody has a great night. Thank you again, Doug, our presenter, for joining us. Mr. Kudomo, thank you as well, too, for putting this presentation together. And Mr. Memkej, our technology coordinator, is critical in executing and making sure that this night went off without a hitch. So thank you.